If you're new here, welcome. I'm Preston, a licensed broker and land investor with hundreds of deals under my belt. On this channel, I'm breaking down the exact systems, the strategies, and all the lessons I've learned so you can build your land business faster. So let's dive right into it. All right, so today we'll be covering how to make fuck you money by AI maxing your land flipping business. Now, before we begin, I wanted to just allow you to get a better understanding of how we are implementing AI within our day-to-day systems, within not only my daily life, but also within my team. And just to see how hopefully you could take a few of these lessons and tools and whatnot and just implement them into your business as well, because it has increased our efficiency tenfold. So hopefully find some value from this video. Let's start it up. So the majority of our AI systems right now, or AI models, consist around Claude. When we were first beginning, we used base 44, and we also use NAN as well. And so pretty much all of our systems, for the most part, is some variation of one of these tools, but mostly Claude. Claude is the big one here. All right, so before we actually jump into our framework, let's first understand our framework, right? So this is kind of how we approach not only our day-to-day tasks and whatnot, but I will be also kind of constructing the video around this type of thought process. And that is pretty much thinking, building, and executing, right? So thinking is pretty much know why you're doing it. The build, whenever you see this yellow block, that's pretty much to set up how you're going to do it. And executing is how you're going to make the money, right? That's pretty much saying, hey, let's just go and do it. All right. So I know you guys saw the title and you're probably thinking, what the hell is this guy talking about? So why AI maxing? Because at the end of the day, we want to stop trading our time for money. Our time is the most valuable asset. That is the one thing we need to protect by any means necessary. And here are the few ways that we're doing it. So as I mentioned earlier, your time is your most valuable asset, but AI removes a lot of the manual work, right? So depending on where you're at within your business, if you are leveraging, let's say, virtual assistants, or even if you have your first part-time employee, or even if you have a full-time employees, AI was able to remove a lot of the manual work and the admin work in our day-to-day. What does this mean, right? This allows us to focus on deals and not like the menial type of tasks that just tends to take up a lot of our day, right? That are important, but not as important as getting those agreements signed, right? So we don't have to worry about following up so much. We don't have to worry about, emails. We don't have to worry about getting in contact with the attorneys, following up with the attorneys, ordering drone services, following up with the county, following up with the planning department, following up with the environmental health department. Now that we have these AI agents working in the background, all this is happening around the clock, right? And if you have a land business, sometimes you may have an oddball call after hours or before you step into the office. We have these agents running around the clock. So it's never a time where we are missing a contact or an important email or important call, because a lot of times all this is being responded to within about 30 minutes, right? And what's really good about this, or one of the reasons that I really like it, is that it's in my natural speaking tone for the most part, right? So when I'm emailing, it's not like a robotic type of email. It's how I would normally conversate, which is really important. But so we're still in the thinking stage. So let's jump over to the land council, right? And this is pretty much what we called our, so the land council pretty much operates as like a strategic advisor, right? So essentially, and it works in Claude, right? It was encoded in Claude and it's built on the Claude platform. But essentially what it operates as is a I guess what in the AI world I'm trying to think of the term. It's a multi-agent framework, right? So instead of like one agent or one model answering the question, you have multiple specialized agents, each attacking the problem from their own perspective or from their own lane. And the reason why this is important is because if you know anything, just talking with, let's say, Chat GPT or whatever, they tend to carry a confirmation bias. And within that confirmation bias, the AI model is just it tells you what you want to hear. And in business, we really want to get to the root of the issue or the root of the problem. So the fact that we have multiple agents bouncing ideas off each other allows us to kind of cut through smoke, if you will, and allow us to get directly to what we are looking for. So we can then implement it to our business and keep everything moving forward, which is really important. All right, so let's step into part 3, right, or step 3. So AI as your operating system, not just a tool, but a complete infrastructure. So as I mentioned earlier, we've almost implemented some form of AI within every part of our business. So as I mentioned earlier, it replaces a lot of the manual work across the business, right? It's running while we're asleep. So a lot of the mistakes I do see other business owners making with Claude and just whatever AI system is that they are running it on the same desktop that they are working on. And that's a mistake because you essentially have to watch it run, right? You have to watch it complete these tasks. The way we implement it is we use a remote desktop. So we don't even see a lot of these applications running. Right now, we can double check. Let's say if it sends an email, we can double back and look at the email that is sent just to make sure that it's in accordance with the tonality and time frame that we are wanting to meet. But it's not distracting us on our day-to-day tasks, which is really important. It keeps our business really, really lean. It keeps it extremely lean and extremely efficient, and allows us to scale without adding headcount. Right? Normally, if we wanted to, let's say, free up our time as operators, as business owners, we would typically want to hire, say, a part-time employee to kind of, help with that bottleneck. But now we can just teach our AI system a skill and save that additional money and kind of, funnel that additional cash to, more important operations, or possibly kind of executing on a one-off type of deal that needs a quicker closing, or even, bringing our 5-star employees and moving them from a part-time position to a full-time position, and doubling down on the team members that actually make our business move and move the needle, so all of these things you have to factor in, and it's been extremely important for us as well. So let's jump back into the Land Council and kind of the reason why we created it the way we did is that the confirmation bias within AI was killing our systems and it was killing our decision. A lot of times it would, and I may go off on a tangent here, but it would tend to like hallucinate a lot and just pretty much repeat back to us what we ask it to do, which really wasn't beneficial to us at all, because the way that we use it is not necessarily as an end-all be-all, but we're kind of using it in the sense of as a different perspective, kind of like a strategic advisor, as you would, like someone just to bounce ideas off of and kind of see things from a different perspective. So we have the best way, best solution for whatever problem that we're trying to attack, if that makes sense. So, and that's the issue we were running with when we assumed The AI had all the answers. And I think a lot of operators and just business owners feel like, it's, AI is all knowing, if you will, but you have to train it. It can only give you what you train it to do, if that makes sense. So yeah, anyway, so multiple agents canceled out this bias, that confirmation bias. And at the end of the day, the strongest argument always wins. So we're always getting 9 out of 10 times the best answer, which helps us a lot, So to the building part, and this is actually my favorite part, just in general. So I told you how AI is helping with emails, how it's helping with the, menial day-to-day administration tasks. But it also helps us with our mailers as well, right? It helps us with pricing. It helps us with a sense of pricing, not only for when we're looking to sell the property or looking to value add or develop the property, but it's also helping us with our pricing of the acreage when we're sending off that mailers as well. So we have a tool that we created, and it pretty much scans all of these Zillow listings. It's scanning on market and off market listings, on market and off market listing. It's scanning all of the MLS of deals that actually close on market, so we can get a really, really, really accurate price per acre for our mailers. And it's done probably within 5 minutes. So that saves us a ton of time. Beforehand, we would have to manually go through. I can just kind of tell you how we were doing it before when we first started. We would manually go through Zillow. We would pull up the sold comps, and we would manually go and see exactly how much was being charged per acre for the amount of acres that we were looking to use within our mailer, if that makes sense. So just basically looking for comps, right? But even though we set a day aside for this specific task, it would take maybe 3 or 4 hours a lot of times, 5 hours. It would almost take the entire day for that mailer. Now it's done within 30 minutes. Send it to the printer, and it's a done deal. How much time would that save you in your business? And these tools have a compounding effect as well. So that's something to think about. If you can save up 2 to 3 hours a day, I'm not sure what your schedule looks like if you do a time block or whatnot, but how much time would that save you during the day? Something to think about, So we're also using it for a flood zone overlay as well. So again, back to our mailers. Even though we filter the individual contacts or the individual or the individual addresses, that we are about to send, I would say another 10 to 20%, maybe 20%, 25% that we're sending to that still have valid addresses are still undesirable properties that we would never purchase. A lot of these are in wetlands, a lot of these in flood zones, They may be bordering a creek within a county that has an exorbitant buffer requirement. So if you have, let's say, 100-foot buffer on a 3-acre property, what exactly can you do with that? Or on like a 2-acre property, 1-acre property, really, what can you really do with that? So it helps us remove, or even on a larger property. Sometimes you may see properties that have half of the property within a flood zone. Is that something that you would really want to purchase? Let's be honest here. If you go back and you look at your pipeline, right? You look at your CRM, what type of deals are you closing on? 9 out of 10 times, they're not flood zone properties. Now, if you get a hell of a deal, of course, yes, we understand that you can probably sell that property. Yes, I understand that. We're not saying that. But look at the properties that you're actually closing on. What do those look like? And there's any type of consistency in there, That's something that you can probably filter out, you know? So I mentioned this a bit earlier about pulling comps from Zillow and the MLS. This is something we were doing manually. Now it's automated for us, which is pretty cool. And it just frees up time, allows us to spend more time on what actually moves the needle. So step 6, right? Or part 6, we're still in the building phase. It's still my favorite part right here. So seller and buyer management. As I mentioned earlier, and you'll see that I repeat a lot of these key concepts and topics, but it really automates, so I want to say every touch point, but I'll say a lot of the different touch points within our business. So it scores our leads on hot, warm, and cold and gives it a score from 1 to 10. So depending on the lead source, on where it's coming from, depending on the overlay that we had mentioned earlier, depending on how they reached out to us, depending on how many times they reached out to us, depending on their communication timeline, depending on the closing timeline, depending on their address, depending on the dynamics of the property, we can kind of get a general idea of how this property will end up closing and how fast it will close, right? For example, if a property's owner is located outside of the state in which they're actually located in, hopefully I said that correctly, they don't really have that attachment to the property like an owner that actually lives on the property would, or somebody who lives within the same city as that property. It's a different conversation. You understand? So how are you grading that in your back end? Are you grading it at all? Are you even ranking that at all? Just something to think about. But also it helps with our follow-up sequence. And what I mean by follow-up sequence is the different touch points. So for example, what I normally see, and I say what we normally see because I've done this myself as well, to where the follow-up sequence or just following up at all is pretty much non-existent. But that's when you really close on those deals, right? When you're following up not 1 or 2 times, but 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, sometimes 10 times, right? You have to understand that these sellers have a life of their own, right? They probably have kids, they probably have a family, they're probably working a full-time job. Their life is really hectic. And sometimes the land is not on the front of their mind. They want to sell it, they know they have an issue, and they're looking for somebody to solve that issue. But if you're not disciplined enough to follow up every day, then you need to create a system that can do that for you. But you have to be aware enough in order to recognize that that's an issue within your own business that you need to take care of. And this has pretty much solved that issue for us, to where we're reaching out to them, 7, 8, 9 times, a lot of times. And when they do engage, we can already start up that conversation. Then we send it to our land specialist, and then we send it over to underwriting. And they have a deal within 48 hours. And then on top of that, if a lead does end up in the dead category, or it's like a non-contact type of category, then we have a follow-up system for that as well, to where we're constantly engaging with them. And we may have over 2,000, 3,000 dead leads that become alive, like 2 or 3 or 4 come alive within, every week, and we already have the full history of the communication in which we had with this seller. And now they're going right and back into our CRM, so we can get them an offer, so we can send that an offer and eventually close on the deal. What does that look like in your business? How many dead leads do you have? When's the last time you followed up with them? So that's something to think about as well. And then the last and final step, Send, sign, and close it. At the end of the day, the end goal is to send out the agreement, send out the offer, send it out. So as I mentioned earlier, our entire direct mail campaign is pretty much automated. I would say maybe 85% of it's automated, which is really cool, and just saves a lot of time. But even back to the AI, not only do we have it handling our systems, it handles a lot of our design work as well, right? We had it create our landing page. We had it create, now granted, we had to provide it with the skills in order for it to create it to the aesthetic and, how can I say, the vibe, if you will, that we wanted for that website. But that saved us, 5 figures easily, close to maybe 6 figures. I would say 5 figures is more accurate estimate. But it designed our offer letters, it designed our welcome packets, it designed our landing page, and allows us to have a cohesive branding package that we are presenting to the seller, which at the end of the day induces trust, right? It builds that trust with the seller. And that's really important too, because, I think land flippers, investors, however you want to say, developers, they do have a stigma attached to them, like they're, and I think I said this in the previous video, they're like the used car salesman, which most of us aren't, of course, but it is what it is. So when you are able to have that trust factor right out the gate, so you're saying my branding of my letter looks the same as my website, that looks the same as the welcoming package or the credibility package, even though you may not think that it's important, it is important. And, having these systems in place are helping us with design has just helped that much more. And then, as I mentioned earlier, everything runs without you touching it, right? Unless you're trying to introduce it a new skill or teach it a new skill, or, maybe teach it a new work procedure within the back end. It's pretty much hands off, right? And it's consistent. It does exactly what we needed to do every day. And that's what's really important. And I don't want to paint a picture where this was extremely seamless and it was extremely easy to set up, because it wasn't, right? But it's worth its weight in gold, right? And part of the reason why it was a bit easier for us to set up, because we had a lot of the work procedures already set up for our previous employees. So when we were training the system, it wasn't something to where we had to start from ground zero. Like, I can give you a good example right here. So we have a lead manager, and this is just one of the work procedures that we provide for them, so they can reference and complete their daily task. So this is something that we just taught our AI system, right? What to do with a new lead, what to do with the research. And this is the actual work procedure, right? What to do on this stage, pre-follow-up stage, send to underwriting, and which each stage means, and when to move on to the next stage. That's something that's very teachable, very teachable. So when you are, and I say that to say that you have to be creating these templates, you have to be creating the systems in your business. So when you do take that step, it's pretty seamless for you guys, So again, this is what I wanted to cover today. How to make fuck you money by AI maxing your land business. But at the end of the day, it's really about understanding your time is your most valuable asset. That's what's really important here. Time is your most valuable asset. So until next time, y'all take it easy. I'm out.